Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to continue our way through Fars Homeric Greek, looking at lines 364 to 385. This is the first part where Achilles recounts what went on between him and Agamemnon to his mom. Now, this section, because it is a replay of the earlier section without the speeches, gets special critical consideration. As a matter of fact, the 3rd century AD critic Aristarchus actually condemned these lines as superfluous and indeed contradictory insofar as the first thing Achilles says to his mom is oista. You already know, when she asks him, after she's asked him, why are you so sad? But the real objection, this is Leaf speaking, the real objection is, of course, that these lines are not required, at least from 368. They're not required for the sake of the hearer. And indeed, there's about a 10-line section that is word for word, maybe with one word different of the earlier account, which you'll certainly recognize. Now, Kirk, in his Oxford commentary, goes on a little bit more, and I want to read what he has to say about this section. He says, regarding lines 366 to 392, this earlier part, over half, of Achilles' reply to Thetis's inquiry, is a long summary, without the all-important speeches, of the events dramatically described so far, and which have led to Achilles' present distress. It is surprising to find such a summary so close to the beginning of the whole poem, and so soon after the extremely full description of arguments and events. Thetis does not need it, nor does the singer or his audience at this point, although sometimes such a resume can be helpful to both. And then he repeats how Aristarchus evidently aestheticized all 27 verses. And then Kirk goes on to give a detailed consideration of some of the differences and what is added. And you can consult that on your own. I just want to read what he says at the end, his summary. He says, such a survey demonstrates that the whole passage is far from being a mere mechanical summary of what has preceded. It naturally makes extensive use of the earlier language, but often departs from it in order to bypass the omitted speeches and make the condensation more fluent. This is not the work of a rhapsode or decadent singer, but of a singer working within a living oral tradition. There is no obvious reason for denying that he is the main composer himself, although the initial puzzle would remain. Why did he find a summary of this length necessary so soon after the events and arguments had been set out in extenso? Competent and fluent though it may be within its chosen limitations, it is not, after all, very dramatic or interesting, at least compared with the fuller version. One possibility is that it was composed as a shorter alternative to the whole quarrel scene, one that could be used when mood and circumstances required, although it is not so easy to see when such a successful episode could have seemed superfluous. He means the fuller one. Another explanation is that this is the original version, or at least an earlier one, of the Crusades story, on the basis of which the main composer developed the fuller and dramatic version complete with speeches. Subsequently, the shorter version might have been incorporated in the complete poem after slight adaptation as an aide-memoire to Thetis, the difficulty here being that the language of the two versions suggests that the longer is being abbreviated rather than the shorter expanded. Neither of these explanations is particularly attractive, and the puzzle remains, although its impact on the unity and effect of the whole book should not be exaggerated. And what I've read from are pages 91 to 93 of G.S. Kirk's commentary by Cambridge University Press. What I think it's interesting to note is that once you've read this so-called summary, I think you can go further and actually give the Homeric composer quite a bit of credit for what might even be stated as the discovery of subjectivity. Because what's important in this recounting is actually what Achilles leaves out. And what I mean by that is, whenever anyone is involved in a controversial event where they might not be entirely in the right, if they're retelling the event, they will naturally tell it in such a way to be favorable to themselves. And if you compare the way Achilles relates the event to his mom, as opposed to the way it is related more objectively in the first version, you really do see someone basically covering their tracks. Achilles leaves out the fact that he challenged, he assured the seer that he had nothing to fear from Agamemnon, i.e. he challenged Agamemnon's physical prowess, saying, "I'll protect you." He leaves out most certainly the stinging insults and name-calling he sent Agamemnon's way. There are quite a few omissions, so if you were an undergraduate working on this, I think this would be a great paper topic to examine more closely. What are the omissions and how this reduced so-called recount, summary actually serves Achilles' interest, and in that sense is psychologically real in a way that one almost hesitates to give credit to Homer if this is totally self-conscious. But here I remind you of what someone said in a used bookstore when we came across Homer, talking about Homer. This was someone who worked in Moe's Books in Berkeley. He said, "The curse of Western literature is that the first work of Western literature is the best work of Western literature." So I myself do not put it past the master poet of the Iliad to have actually invented subjectivity, or at least discovered it and explicated it in Achilles' retelling of what happened, which is quite favorable to himself. Okay, so that's my take on it. Let's look at the first part of it, lines 364 to 385. Tein de barus denakon, prosepe podasocus Achillius. Voista ti etoi tat idue pant agoreuo. Oikomet eis deben, hieren, polen hetionos. Tein de di pratomen te kai egomen entadeta panta. Kai tamen eu da santo metasphisen vie sakaion. Ec de lon atre ide cruce ida cali pare on. Cruces daut hierus hecate bolu apollonos. El tetoas epineas akaion calco kitonon. Lus somenos tetugatra peron taperesi apoina. Stemmatekon in kesen heke balu apollonos. Crusoiana skeptoi, kai lisetopantas akaius. Atreida de malesta duo, cos metore laon. Int aloimen pantes epe upeme sana kai oi. Aides thai tierea, kai agla adek diapoina, al uk atre ide agamemnoni wandana tu moi, alla cacosa pie, crateron depemuton etele. Ko omenos dogeron palen orketo, toyo da polon, uxamenu ekusen, epe malawoi pilos en. Heke dep argeoisi, kakon belos, hoi denun la oi, neskon epasu deroi. Ta de boiketo, kela de oio, pante anastraton urun agaion. Hame demantes eu eidos agor eu de opropias vegatoio. Okay, so there we have the first bit. And we see, like I said, that a big section of this is just repeats the description of the priest coming. And then this last bit, 80 to 85, is actually a summary of what comes after the prayer, omitting the actual prayer and such. Okay, so it's interesting, for instance, that Achilles says, "Ko omenos do geron palen oiketo," that he went away angry, when in fact, in the narrative, he went away afraid and prayed to Apollo, and etc. So, like I say, this would be a beautiful paper topic for an undergraduate if you were working on the first book of the Iliad. So let's look at this and let's look at some of the vocabulary that is new here. So, tein de barus denakon prosepe podasokus akilius. So, baru is neuter, and so adverbio from barus, barea, baru. And of groaning, it means heavy or deeply, heavily or deeply. Tein de barus denakon prosepe. So the tein, the accusative feminine, of course, is the object of prosepe, and podasokus akilius. Now, stenako is to groan or moan. So, again, we've seen Achilles crying. Now he's groaning and moaning. And prosepe, of course, imperfect of address prosepe, from peme. Voista, ti etoi tauta idwia panta goreuo. So, oista, look at the form at Smythe 799. Oista is from oid plus theta alpha, and the delta, of course, becomes sigma before the other dental of the theta. So, oista. Ta, which can be taken as a strengthened form of t if it's put together, but if, like Becker, you separate it into te, it just is the affirmative. Why indeed? And toy, of course, equals soy. So, why should I say all these things to you? Soy idwie. Now, idwie is from the iota delta stem of oida, and it's we see that it is the perfect dative singular feminine participle from oida. And so, knowing it already, why should I tell you when you know it already? And agoreuo, of course, is to speak of, to tell of, expound. Now, it's interesting here because in book one, it's at this point that we move from the earth and move towards heaven. The gods start to enter. The divine machinery starts to move. And it's interesting here that Achilles almost assumes a omniscience that his mother already knows. Of course, she knows everything, which really isn't the way it works with the gods. But, there's so many interesting topics around the treatment of the gods in the Iliad that I just want people to be aware that now we are shifting into a more direct consideration of the world of the gods itself. Oikomet estaben hieran polen hetionos. So oikometa, of course, is imperfect of oikomai, to go or make one's way. And here we have Theban, accusative of destination, but not really, because it does have the preposition. So Thebe, which was near Troy, home of Andromache, who was the daughter of Etion, its king. Andromache, of course, is the wife of Hector, famously so. And Hetionos, genitive, Etion was the king of Thebe. Tein de diapratomente kai hegomen entare panta. So diapratomen is second aorist of diaperto, and to sack or ravage a town. And so tain refers to the town. Tein de diapratomen. And hegomen, of course, is to carry off captive, to carry off as captive. And so here we have the second aorist of ago in its reduplicated form. Oh no, it has a reduplicated form, but here we just simply have the imperfect. Diapratomen and hegomen are imperfect, describing the whole process. So entade, hither, we brought it back here to our camp. Tein de diapratomen te kai hegomen entade panta. So again, tein de barus tenakon prosepe podos ocus achilius. Vois ta ti etoi tauta idwie pantagoreuo. Oikomet estebe hieren polen hetionos. Tein de diapratomente kai hegomen entade tanta. Kai tamen eudasanto metasphisen huesakaion. Ek delon atre ide cruce ida kali pareon. So modifying dasanto means duly, rightly, and well in accordance with usage. So dasanto, first aorist from dateomai, to divide. So there was a proper division among themselves. Ek delon atre ide cruce ida kali pareon. Now notice that it's not Agamemnon himself who chose Chryseis, but the Greeks chose her for him. Interesting point. And then now, Chryseis daut hierus hekate balu Apollonos eltes doas epineas akaion kalkokitonon. So doubt is but then, okay, but next, doubt, and kalkoketon, kalkoketonos is bronze clad. Bronze is kalkos, keton is garment. Okay, so bronze clad. And this will be a very common epithet of the Greeks that we'll see quite numerous down the road, but this is the first occurrence here, which is noteworthy. And, okay, now we get the bit that's just a repeat of earlier. Chryseis daut hierus hekate balu Apollonos eltetoas epineas akaion kalkokitonon lusomenos tetugatra peron taperesi apoina. Stematekon in kesin hekabalu Apollonos. Crusoianas skeptoi. kai lis setopantas akaius. Atra ide de malista duo cos metore laon. Ent aloimen pantes epeu me sana kai oi. Aide stai tierea kai agla adectaia poina. Al uk atra ide agamemnon iwan denatumoi. Alla kakosa pie, krateron depemuton etelen. So, then it concludes with the summary. Ko omenos do geron palen oiketo, toi o da polon, uxamenu ekusen, epe mala voi pilos en. So Palin is back, i.e. to where he came from. Oi keto, of course, is from oikomai, to go. And then this toi o e uxamenu heikusen, akuo ekusen is from akuo, to hear. He heard him. And when you have a verb of hearing with a genitive, it means he heard him directly. He didn't hear of it by hearsay. He heard him directly. Him praying, he heard directly, Apollo did. Because epe mala voi pilos en. This dative you can look up at 1499 and 1461. Because he was very much a friend to him, i.e. to Cruces. Heke dep arge oisi kakon belos, hoidenun la oi, neskon epasu teroi. Ta de poiketo ke la de oio, pan te anastraton urun akai on. Hame de mantis eu eidos agor eu de oprias hekatoio. So again, he jumps straight, just totally omits in speaking to his mom of Calchas's request that someone make sure that he be protected from Agamemnon's wrath. He totally omits that part that really sets the quarrel going. Okay, so nes kon epasuteroi, tad epoiketo ke late oio, pantheanastraton uron akaion, hami de mantis. So epasuteroi, we haven't seen this before. It means one after another in quick succession. Epasuteroi. Epoikomai, of course, is to attack or to assail. Kalon is a missile in the plural of the missiles of Apollo. And here, note Smythe 996, a neuter plural subject is regarded as collective and hence has its verb in the singular. So the kala, the plural, epoiketo. And hamen equals hamin, see Smythe 325D1. Pantheanastraton urun akaion, hame demantes eu eidos agore ue de oproprias hekatoio. So eu eidos, eu modifying oida means well, fully, thoroughly. And the oprias, we've seen that, the divine will in the plural of the divine commands. That's how it was used earlier. Hekatos is an alternative to hekatebalos, the far shooter, i.e. equals Apollo. Hamin de mantis eu eidos agor eu de oprias hekatoio. Okay. Heke dep arge oise kakon belos, hoi de nu la oi neskon epasuteroi, ta depoi keto ke la te oio, pante anastraton uron akaion, hame de mantis ou eidos agoreue de oprobias hekadoio. Okay, so there we have the first part of Achilles' response and recounting of the quarrel to his mother. I'll be back very soon with the remainder of the speech. Continue working hard in your Greek, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.